Well, hey there, Mama, and welcome back to the Moms Overcoming Overwhelm podcast, episode number 142. I'm Emily McDermott, and I'm here beside you on this journey as we work together to declutter your home, head, and heart. As you know, I am taking a bit of a break from the podcast for July and August, and today I am bringing you my interview on the Motherhood Restored podcast with Natalie Hixson. Natalie was a guest on this podcast. She was on episode 106. Triggered by your kids, recognize destructive anger, tame your triggers, and overcome the negative thought spiral. And in this episode, we are talking about calming the overwhelm in motherhood. We talk about the 3 causes of overwhelm, how to reduce decision fatigue, the power of saying no, minding our shoulds. We even talk a little bit about photo organization and some more tactical things. And just as a reminder, Natalie is a wife, mama to 3, certified professional Christian life coach who helps Christian discouraged moms overcome destructive anger and burnout. And her podcast is geared towards Christian women, so you will hear us talk a little bit about that aspect of our faith. And it's a wonderful conversation. I hope you really enjoy it. So without further ado, grab that notebook and pen and enjoy my conversation with Natalie Hixson. Hey there, Mama. Are you tired of all the stuff crowding your home, calendar, and mind? Do you wish you could say goodbye to the endless to-do list running around in your head? Want to declutter but don't know where to start? You're in the right place. Welcome to Moms Overcoming Overwhelm, where you will find proven and practical solutions to declutter your home, head, and heart. Hi, I'm Emily, a wife, boy mom, and simplicity seeker. I struggled to get pregnant and felt overwhelmed until I discovered decluttering could create the physical and emotional space I needed to become a mom. Now, 2 kids later, I've transformed my life in motherhood by developing simple systems around decluttering, capsule wardrobes, kid stuff, cleaning and tidying, meal planning, time management, and more, and I can't wait to share them with you. If you're ready to reclaim the time and energy you crave, be present with your kids, and finally enjoy the life and motherhood you so deserve, let's kick overwhelm to the curb, shall we? Grab your lukewarm coffee, your notebook and pen, and clear up some counter space. Let's do this.
Hello, today I'm so excited. I have Emily McDermott on, and we are going to talk about mom life with organizing and overwhelm. And I know that this was part of my journey of overcoming destructive behaviors. There was definitely an element of working through just like organizing, not even just my emotions, but my house and all of that. And so I'm really excited to have Emily on today. And Emily, I'm going to let you just introduce yourself and we'll go from there. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Natalie. I am thrilled to be here. Also thrilled that you have started this podcast. So it was wonderful having you as a guest on my podcast, and I resonate so much with your story, and you really blessed my listeners a lot. So thank you.
Thank you, because you were actually one of the people encouraging me to get this podcast started. So
Yay.
yay.
Yay. And here we are. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I am a mom of 2 boys that are 6 and 8, and been married to my husband, Pat, for 15 years. We live outside of Washington, D.C. We're a military family, but permanently stationed in this area, which is an unusual thing. So
Yeah.
we haven't had to move every 2 to 3 years. And the way I got into decluttering and organizing was actually dealing with infertility and the fact that I wanted to be a mom and it wasn't happening. And I was working full time, chronic people pleaser, stressed, overwhelmed, all of the things. And when I realized that we were going to have to do in vitro fertilization, which is a very rigorous protocol as far
Yeah.
as what you need to do, I realized that it was too much on my plate. And if we wanted to make that physical space in our home and also that emotional space to hopefully be able to have the baby that we wanted, that we needed to change some things. So I learned about minimalism and decluttering and simplifying. And then I had started with my stuff, like most people do, and then moved on to more my schedule and more like the mental clutter, since that was really key, staying positive through that process. And when we were lucky enough to have our oldest via IVF, We were then surprised with a surprise free baby, Dawn. Then I had two under two. And that's more when some of the anxiety and some of the anger issues that we talked about on my podcast came out, where I never realized I was an angry person until I had children and had to navigate that. And simplicity and having a decluttered and organized home has really helped me with my emotional regulation. And also just that I'm a very sensitive person to my environment. If I have that decluttered environment, it allows me not to have so many outbursts or emotional dysregulation issues. So now I podcast at Moms Overcoming Overwhelm, and I help overwhelmed moms declutter their homes, heads, and hearts. So that's a little bit about me.
I love it. Thank you so much. And yeah, going through that whole experience, I've never experienced in vitro myself, but just have watched friends and family walk through that. And I know that it's very intense. And so thanks for sharing. And yeah, when you talk about the having things working through the overwhelm and the clutter and stuff like that, I definitely resonate in how I also am sensitive to my surroundings. And I'll say my third child broke me a bit. I finally was able to go to bed with a sink full of dishes after she was born, but before I definitely had a really difficult time with some of those type of issues and things. But yeah, something that I think of as you were talking about that was I remember being shamed by friends when they'd come to my house because my house was tidy and organized and clean. And they'd just be like, how do you have time for all this? And they'd make me feel bad for it. But it really was something that kind of helped me cleaning and tidying up was something that helped me process through emotions. It gave me time to think. It gave me some sense of I can control the unorganized closet if I can't control my screaming toddler. At least there's something I feel like I can do constructively. And so I tried to look at it as in a positive thing, not such a there's something wrong with me because I keep my house clean. So, anyways, just thoughts on that. I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I resonate with that a lot. And I always say, like, simplicity is my sanity, because I can tell, like, when I start getting stressed out for whatever reason, and maybe it is that my kid's not listening to me, which has been a difficult thing for me because as a child, everything was very performance based from my parents. If you perform, if you get good grades, if you listen, if you follow the rules, then you get the praise, right?
Yeah.
And so that's how I was conditioned. And then as a mom, when it's, oh, but my kids don't want to listen and they don't want to follow the rules, but wait a minute, this is what they're supposed to do. That has been a theme, just like difficult for me to process and deal with. And I have been working on it. But then it's, oh, I can keep my bedroom decluttered and organized. I just did a kind of massive Lego organization project here because that's the main thing my kids play with. And it was like, Mommy, can you find a purple one piece that's shiny with blah, blah, blah? And it's like this huge, massive Legos. And I was like, no. So I really did this kind of hyper organized, semi maybe crazy organization system. However, it was like, oh, I can control this. And now when they ask me for something, I can find it. And that is like the dopamine hit for me. Like, I know where things are, I can find them. And also that they're not overwhelmed by their environment, because I think that a lot of parents don't recognize that overwhelm is not just something that we experience in our homes, but our children experience it. And it's stimulus overwhelm for them, more tactile and visual. And so we have to recognize, like, it is, I can laugh about my hyper organization system for Legos. However, having Legos all over the floor and they can't find what they need, that causes stress and overwhelm for my kids. So it is something that helps me control my environment, but it also positively impacts my health and my kids' health if I can have that non-cluttered environment.
And then there's also, I know there's definitely going to be moms listening who are like, I can't do that, or I don't care, or I like my house, like it feels lived in and messy. And so just a little note, like it's totally okay. Either way you are. But when it comes to, I guess, accepting, first of all, if that is stressful for you, it's okay to do something like what you're talking about, which by the way, that sounds amazing. Your Lego organizing system. I would have loved that 5, 10 years ago. My girls loved Legos too. But anyways, it's meeting yourself, understanding what it's one of those things where what is setting you off when so I love having you on here because this was definitely something for me. I went through, I don't know if you ever heard of the book, The House That Cleans Itself. It's
No.
like an older book. I'm sure that like things that you're doing now and what I've heard you doing, I'm like, oh, this is better. But it was just something that I did. And it it really helped me recognize, wow, there's definitely some of these things in my home and some of the ways that we're doing things in my home that are causing added stress to me. And if I can make a few shifts here, then I take one more thing off my plate that's not adding to the emotional stress and pressure of what's going on for me. Rhythms and routines are really helpful. That doesn't say, not to say that we don't get out of them. And when we do, it's okay. We can come back to them, but what are we coming back to? So, how do we establish some of those things in our lives that can be helpful? One of the things that I tell people when they're mamas, when they're working with me is you can have all the routines and the systems and the organization done. But if you don't work through what's going on inside, it won't matter if your house is clean or not.
Yeah.
So processing those emotions is huge. So tell me how I want to get to you talking about how you work through the actual tactile organizing and things like that. But tell me some of the things that you felt maybe helped you in your journey as you were working through some of this emotional processing yourself as a mom.
Yeah, for me, it was when I had my second child, not expecting that we were going to have two under two. And it was the issue of decision fatigue and just having that reduced capacity. And so, one of the things that I talk a lot on my show about is removing unnecessary decisions. And that kind of goes back to simplifying those rhythms and routines a little bit. So, asking yourself for in this season, what unnecessary decisions can I remove from my life? So that might be that in a season you decide to have one thing for breakfast, or that you limit the number of choices you have for clothing so that it's easier to get dressed in the morning. Or for me, I follow a workout program where I don't need to think about it. I just go, okay, what am I doing today? I'm going to do that. And that really freed up my emotional and mental capacity for the things that were really important, especially in that season of having a lot of emotional dysregulation and anger issues and some of those things. So I think that's a great place to start, because what we don't always recognize is that the number of things that we have to make choices between those things, and the more choices you make, those are more decisions, and then you have that decision fatigue. So if you're able to simplify anything in your either environment or the things that you're doing for you or your kids, that's really going to help you, especially if you're dealing with some of these emotional dysregulation or processing issues. So that was huge for me.
Mhm. Yeah, cutting down on the other things too that you're saying yes to. I know you and I think we've talked about this a little bit, but say we want to say yes to people. We want to people please and do some of these things that, yeah, we want to help everyone and please everyone. But in doing that, we really do a disservice to our emotional regulation and our family as well, because it just fries us completely.
Yeah, and I have found that now that my kids are a little bit older and they are in school, the hardest thing for me has been all of the volunteer opportunities at the school,
Oh,
and
yeah.
kind of the mom guilt around not
Mm.
wanting to do all of them, and being very selective and intentional about what I do choose, based upon, again, I always go back to what is my capacity in this season based upon everything else that I have going on. It's not necessarily that I have to have the mindset, which I used to have, which was no one else is going to do it, so I should do it. The should, right? I should do it because no one else is going to. But now it's more like, is this life giving? Is this life draining? Is this something that I feel is best suited for me in this season, or am I feeling that guilt or obligation? So that is another aspect about decision making, like you said, like how we're actually spending our time and whether it fits within not only our values, but just like our capacity to manage it.
Yeah. Oh, you bring up a good point there too. The false guilt that we get from it's not a sin to not sign up for volunteering. And someone might make a comment or do something that makes you feel like you're a bad person for it, but you're not sinning in the eyes of God to not volunteer for something or to say, what's really important is our priorities. And our priorities, the way I teach them is God first, husband, marriage second, kids, everything else. Of course, you're in there. God first is you and him and taking care of yourself, like your immediate needs and stuff. But it's if me volunteering for a bunch of stuff at my kiddo's school is going to cause me extra stress and overwhelm, and I'm going to get angry and use destructive behaviors on my kids and husband because I've taken on too much, then that's where the sin lies, right? Because we are then prioritizing our pride and what other people are going to think and say about us over our duties as a mom and a wife and a child of the Lord.
Yeah, just I think also about what am I idolizing? So, am I idolizing the fact that someone thinks that I'm helpful or useful? And I think also church volunteering, that has been really tough
Yes.
too, because then it's the church. So, I'm obviously serving God if I volunteer and serve and everything in the church. But again, it goes back to what is the cost? Like kind of that cost benefit. Like, what is the cost of that? And if it's costing me things with my family or my husband or how I'm able to emotionally regulate, like that's not what God wants. And so it is really having to put on the blinders because it is I think, a countercultural idea. We're always told to get more, to do more, to be more. Like everything is, you're not doing enough, is the message of culture, in my opinion. And so we're like, oh, I obviously have to serve here and I obviously have to volunteer here because I'm not doing enough right now. But you have to shut that out. And then, like you said, go back to those priorities and really have that confidence that no, this is an alignment and this is not an alignment, and have that confidence in that decision making. But it's hard. It's hard to trust that as a mom sometimes when you see everyone else around you just being completely outside of their capacity and saying yes to everything. So that's been tough for me to find other moms that are like, no, it's okay that you're not volunteering for everything. And I'm like, yeah,
Yeah,
thank you. I appreciate that. So you got to find other like-minded people too, because it's hard, I think, in this day and age.
absolutely. It's how we're supposed to help. We're supposed to be giving and serving. And again, we go back to the priorities. If you are serving out of this guilt, and if you're serving because you want to appear like you're a good person, then you're serving for the wrong reason. And so you go back to, am I serving my family first and pleasing the Lord in that way? And am I asking the Lord, what opportunities and things am I supposed to be doing outside of my home? And to really rely on and submit that into prayer and see where he leads in that. Because there's maybe somebody else fills the position. You're like, think you need to do it. And you prayed about it and you go to do it. And somebody, oh, it's been taken already. And maybe it hasn't. And it's definitely aligns with something that you can do. Like for me at the moment in my where I'm at in my life, what I typically do with my kiddo's school is if I see a sign up for snacks or something, like I can grab some extra snacks at the grocery store and send them to school with her. That's easy. That's something I can absolutely do. I can make my cookies and send them with her, or even make cookies with her and send them. That's something that I know I have the capacity to do and is in alignment with what I have my gifts or whatever at the moment. And so there's definitely times I do go to maybe I am supposed to do this and it's already booked up. So those are good indicators to me. Am I praying about it? Am I serving my family first, which is my priority and what I'm called to do first? And am I doing this out of guilt or pride? So yeah, I love this conversation. I love that we're talking about this because it's really important, that comparison and worrying if we are not doing enough or doing too much. These are some helpful things to think about. I want to jump into kind of what you're teaching and helping moms with. And so tell me some of the causes of overwhelm and tips around them. Tell us more. I love, and organizing all of this. Let's
Yeah,
dive into the meat.
no. I was going to say that we've talked about some of these areas already because a lot of the obligation and the shoulds that will cause overwhelm to anyone. So I love what you said about bringing it to the Lord in prayer and just making sure everything is aligning, and that will help us to live within our capacity and not feel overwhelmed. So if you look at definitions of overwhelm, there are a lot, but I bucketed them into 3 areas. And the first is to bury or drown beneath a huge mass, which I always think about laundry. They're just like under this big pile of laundry, but that's just more like the too much stuff. And so we can talk in a minute here about how we combat or deal with all of these, but I'll just go through them real quick. And then the second is loading or inundating someone with an excessive amount of something. That's more of the too much to do. Again, what we were saying, that we're taking things on because we feel like we should, or whatever the reason may be, and there's just too much on our plate. And then the last is to overpower completely in thought or feeling, which is that feeling of overwhelm that we're all familiar with. And that's more of the mental clutter and kind of the emotional clutter there. When we talk about like how to deal with all of these things when it comes to our physical stuff, I always like to think about what I call the container rule or the container concept. So there is a podcaster, her name's Dana K. White, and I think that she came up with this, so I want to give proper credit, but it's having an artificial boundary around different categories of things. So I'm going to put you on the spot, Natalie. What is one category of stuff that maybe you or your family members struggle with as far as having maybe too much, if anything?
First thought was like papers. I have 3 bins up here and it's just papers or like
Yeah.
cards or
Yeah. No, that's a great example. Paper clutter is, yeah, definitely a huge thing. And so let's say that maybe it is like kids' artwork, for example. Sometimes people, they have all of the worksheets and all of the artwork and things coming home. And then as we get into the summer, we have our crafts and vacation Bible school things and all of that. And so then it is more like, okay, I know I'm not keeping all of this. What do I do? So we want to make sure we have a system around our stuff. So we have a process for reviewing things and processing them. But I would say for paperwork and artwork, if you wanted to keep a certain amount, maybe it would be that you have just like 1 box of the kids' artwork per year. For me, I do a lot of like scanning, and then I'll just keep things that maybe have their handprint or something that actually shows like the actual size. And so then it is having that boundary around that category. And then I actually play this game with my kids, but you can play it too. And it's love, maybe no. So whatever boundary you decide on, you start with what you love, you start filling it with that, then when you like, and then when you start getting to the maybes, then you can decide, okay, do I really want to keep this? In the case of paper, can I scan it? Can I take a picture of it? Or do we just want to let it go? And then anything that you definitely want to get rid of, you again can trash it or declutter it, whatever the case may be. For physical stuff, we like to talk about the container concept or the container rule, and that really helps us not overflow and get overwhelmed with different
I love
categories of
that.
stuff. So
Now,
yeah, so go ahead. I'm
I have a
sorry.
quick question, which as you're talking made me think of something that overwhelms me And it's really one of those things that I probably just need to sit down, schedule time and do it. But I want to hear your thoughts around it because I have a feeling there's a lot of moms who are struggling with this. My phone is full of so many pictures and up to 2014 for since my youngest to 2014, I did these like little digital books of
Mhm.
photos. And I have carry this guilt. No, not sin. I'm not condemning myself to hell or anything for this, but I carry this mom guilt of when the kids will sometimes be like, we want to see those books again. And I'm like, I have so many pictures to go through on my phone. So tell me how you help moms work through that mentally and emotionally, because that's definitely one that keeps weighing on me. I know, I just need to do it, but
Understood. No, I was going to say, yeah, again, there's the should. So we have to make
right?
sure we know why we're doing it. But for my oldest, I did one baby book from like birth to 6 months. And then I was like done. And I was like, yeah, okay, no, I'm not doing that. So you have to decide again what's important to you and your capacity, not so much your kids, because you can, if they're anything like my kids, if you're showing them pictures on your phone or on the computer or something like that, they don't necessarily need the physical book. Now, there are companies that can do that for you pretty
Sure.
easily. I think like chat books is like one of them. But what I would recommend is, first of all, one of the things I do is that I do go through the pictures on my phone every 2 to 3 days. So you're at pickup line in school, you're in a waiting room in a doctor's office, instead of, not saying you do this, but instead of scrolling Instagram or whatever,
Oh,
going
I'm
to your
guilty.
photos. Go to your photos and then just delete those extras. Your kid
Mm.
grabs your phone and takes 500 photos, like
Uh,
just getting rid of those.
that doesn't stop when they're teenagers, by the way.
Oh, great. Good to know. And then what we do in my family is we have a shared album that we share with my parents, my in-laws, aunts and uncles. And then I will add photos of my kids to that shared album. We've been doing that since my oldest was born. And those are like the best of the best photos of the
Mm.
kids. And so then I don't really, I have everything backed up to Google Photos, but then that shared album is that best of the best. So if you ever did want to do like an album or something, it'd be pretty easy. Otherwise, it's just something that they can do automatic slideshows through Google Photos, and your loved ones can also see the photos being posted there in real time. And so I don't really keep any photos on my actual phone because I'm going through everything and every couple days, and then anything is either just backed up to Google Photos or to that shared album. So when it comes to the kids books and the baby books and the doing books every single year, you have to decide, is the physical book that important to me? Because there's no reason to have that weight and that guilt of that project. We call that aspirational clutter. It's, if
Mm.
I had all the time in the world and all the energy, then I would sit down and do my books for my kids for the past 8 years. But really, would you? Like, if you had a whole weekend to yourself, are we really going to do this?
Yeah, probably
Probably
not.
not. Probably not. So releasing that guilt and thinking, is there a way that I can still have those best of the best memories without having to do this huge, like aspirational project that probably won't happen? And for me, that shared album has been the thing that works for me. So I hope that helps.
That's fantastic. I think that's very helpful. Very, it's definitely one of those things where I just need to let the guilt go. And like you said, how do we do it different? And that's, it's important. How do we do something different? Yeah, you've been doing this. That's like a good point in so many things in our lives. We might have a tradition. And then one thing, as your kids get older and into teens and stuff, there are traditions that you will let go because it doesn't fit their age and development anymore. And so there's definitely even things like pictures and photo books that, yes, you're absolutely right. You can transition this into a new type of way that you're doing things. So I love that. That's a good analogy for so many things, not just digital photos.
Yeah, I will say that is probably the area that I have found that moms feel the most guilty about, is just like not having any organization system around photos and then just feeling like I'm never going to be able to get through all of it. And you probably won't. And so, like you said, release the guilt, and then let's figure out a way that is sustainable, even if you have a little more capacity than you do right now, but recognizing that in most seasons, there's going to be this ebb and flow of your capacity to be able to do like extra projects like that. We are giving you the permission slip to let the guilt go when it comes to the
Yes.
photos.
I've also seen, I have a friend who's got, I've been thinking about this too. Mom, don't let dad listen to this one. I was thinking for Father's Day, maybe they have those frames that you can get and that all the family can upload photos and it's like in real time. And then the pictures just come onto they're in their house. They just automatically start showing up on their little frame. That's a really cool thing that I
Yeah,
saw too.
that is a great, like a clutter-free gift. That is
Yeah.
wonderful because, and again, having that shared family album, you know that it's already like the curated album. And so it can just pull from that, and you can have multiple people even contributing to that album if you want it to be like family photos and not just ones of your kids. Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Oh, I realize we're going to go in next into the second part, the load or inundate, the too much to do. And I think I've said the word capacity like 500 times in this interview, but I'm going to say it again
Do it.
because it's so important. So when it
Repetition is
comes,
important.
repetition is important. Yeah, because for me, this was really like a mindset shift for me, which was that most people make decisions about their stuff and then also what they're doing based upon the confines of their house or how much time they have in their calendar. Okay, if we have the room for it in our home, then we should just keep it. Right. But people don't think about their capacity to manage it and also their kids' capacity to manage. So when it comes to what we have on our plate and what we're doing, again, we have to look at, and we were just talking prior to hitting record about summer and how capacities are very different in the summer because your kids are home. Maybe they're not like mine, they're not in a full day camp. So I have to really prioritize and be strategic about what I'm doing when and be able to let some things go. This is not the season to be saying yes to more and more things. So if you are feeling like you are being loaded down with all of these things, and most of them are those life draining things that are causing you to feel overwhelmed, then again, understanding and living within your capacity unapologetically
Mm.
is really important because that's the other thing I've noticed. Like when I say no to something, it's okay to, again, remember that no is that complete sentence. And I don't have to say, no, I'm sorry because I'm doing A, B, and C, or, oh, I'm so sorry I can't do this because of whatever. You can just say, no, I can't do this right now. And you don't have to explain yourself. So yeah,
That's
I would
good.
say for that second aspect of the too much to do. So the first thing is the container concept, and then just living within your capacity for the to dos.
Yeah, no, that's good. I definitely, it's that guilt feeling like you have to explain yourself for everything. You don't. It's can absolutely be, no, it just doesn't
Yeah.
work for me right now. I'm sorry. Or not
Yeah.
sorry.
And I am a poet. That's one of the other things I do is I write custom poetry. So I always love doing like alliteration. So we
Mhm.
have the container concept for the C's, and then we have the living within your capacity, the C. And so when it comes to the too many thoughts, that is going to be capturing, right? We always talk
I
about
love
needing
it.
to capture those negative thoughts. But there is someone, her name is Byron Katie, and she has the work, and there are these 4 questions. So anytime you are having that mind swirl and you're thinking like, oh, I am such a bad mom because I didn't volunteer for a field day and I really should have done it, whatever that thought is that's going on, being able to ask, she has these 4 questions. The first, is it true? Can you absolutely know that it's true? Who would you be or how would you feel if you didn't have that thought? Right.
Mhm.
And then I think the fourth one, I'm going to mess this up, but it's still reverse it and then like reframe it. And
Mhm.
so I think that for that, again, just not taking our thoughts for what they are as is and just being able to capture them, to really hold them up to the light and be like, is this actually true? Or is this like a should statement that I'm feeling guilty? Is it that I'm saying, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed. I have so much to do. But then when I actually look at the things I have to do, there are actually not that many, and I could delete some things or delegate some things. So I think that having that capturing of thoughts rather than blankly just letting the mind swirl happen is how we deal with overwhelm when it comes to our thoughts.
Yeah. The first thing I think of is take all thoughts captive through Christ. And it's not just your negative thoughts, but it's also the thoughts that are overwhelming you that are like, I have to do this and
Mm-hmm.
that. And like doing a mental purge and writing it all out and just getting it. Have you noticed that? If you just write out, sit
Yeah.
down and write everything out that's overwhelming you, it's like, wow, that was taking up so much space in my head, but really it's not that much on paper.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I've learned recently of this concept of the invisible load, which is like that mental load of motherhood, like all the things that we are responsible for. And if you have those pinging around randomly in your head, oh, I have to make this doctor's appointment. So and so's birthday's coming up, and we have to get a gift, and all of those little things, just being able to have those out all on paper. And then you're like, oh, okay, I can handle this. This is something I can. But it's that name it to claim it thing. You can't, if you haven't named it, then it's just the swirl, and you're just going to continue to feel that anxiety. But then being able to just write it down and look at it, then you have a tangible way to actually tackle it. And a lot of the things you might realize aren't either true, or you don't have to do them, or they don't have to be done at all. So you're probably going to get rid of at least 50 to 75% of whatever you
Yes.
write down.
Yes.
And then you actually like only quote unquote have to do like a
Right.
very short number of things. So that's been super helpful for me, because my husband will be like, why are you overwhelmed? I'm like, I have to do this, and the other thing. He's, but what do you actually have to do? I'm like,
Yes.
come on, hubby, dang it. He's always like calling me out, but that's why we make such a good match, because but you don't actually have to do that. No, I don't. But yeah,
That's
that's
so good.
been incredibly helpful for me, because I get in my head a lot, but I'm a written processor. So that pen to paper is like super helpful for me to get over those overwhelmed thoughts for sure.
Absolutely. I need to find the research on this because I studied it a while back, but there's something healing even for taking that extra sense and touching the pen, writing on the paper, and just getting it out. It really helps psychologically process out a lot of things. It's something I make my clients do. They have a lot of writing they have to do. Oh, that's good. What would you say in wrapping up,
Mhm.
um, the mom who's just sitting there, like overwhelmed, and even some of this conversation can bring moms to tears, just feeling, I don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
What do you want to say to that mama who's sitting there in their frustration or pain or just their emotional suffering about it all?
Yeah. First of all, and I know that you say this a lot, Natalie, but no one is alone. No one is
Mm.
experiencing this, that other moms haven't experienced it. And luckily, through things like this podcast and other avenues, people are talking about it more, which I think is really great. So I would say maybe if you look at like those three types of overwhelm, maybe I can just briefly talk about how we can start with each of them. So for starting with
Yeah,
the
I
too
love
much,
that.
yeah, starting with the too much stuff, I always recommend that you start, if you're decluttering, if you start in the most unemotional, unsentimental area. I actually recommend your car, and which isn't in your home at all, but it's a small contained area. There's lots of trash. You don't have a lot of sentimental items, and you're able to make decisions easily, because decluttering is decision making. So we want to start with those easy decisions first, and then you can build up the momentum to other things. Also, in the challenges I do with in my Facebook group, we only do 10 to 15 minutes at a time. We
Ooh,
don't necessarily all have an entire weekend to declutter our home. So just doing those small spurts, and then looking at like subcategories of things. So maybe you do one shelf of books, maybe you do your medicine cabinet. It makes it a lot easier. So that would be, I would say, where to start with stuff, where to start with what to do, or your to-dos would be probably doing that brain dump that we were like talking about, which is the thoughts, but then also for our to-dos. And then I've heard it as like the Eisenhower matrix, but you have like the do, the things that are urgent, important, you absolutely have to do. The things that you can decide, those are the things that you can schedule for a later time. The things that you can delegate that someone else can do, and then delete. So you have do, decide, delegate, delete. Again,
Yes.
alliteration.
I have that
That is
written in my planner.
yeah, that's James Clear. So I didn't come up with that,
Yeah.
but that really helps me to again be like, okay, all of this is all the stuff I quote unquote have to do. Where do I start? We're going to start with that do, the urgent and important. And then I would say where to start with the too many thoughts or feeling overpowered by the thoughts. Again, just writing those things down, seeing what is actually true, and then also what is urgent based upon what you're saying, and knowing that most of the things on there don't need to be done now, don't need to be done by you, or they probably don't need to be done at all. That's where I would recommend starting for those three areas. And hopefully that'll help reduce the overwhelm and anxiety from our mama friends.
Yes, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that and just for coming on and talking about all this with me. I know it's so valuable and important for moms to really don't just sit there and feel stuck. Always, like you were saying, start small, somewhere small, and start. And one of the places I'll start to is like my bathroom drawer with my skincare and stuff. What have I been using? I'll just simply just toss a couple of those things and you'll be amazed at how it can really motivate you to keep going. But I love starting in the car because that is such a great place that needs to be decluttered often, for
Yeah.
sure.
And especially with kids, I'm like,
Oh yeah,
guys, you're supposed to bring your stuff from
I
the
know.
car into the house. And
Maybe you
so
want to go to
especially
the mudroom next.
I know. Yeah, exactly. So everything is like baby steps, but at least getting some of those things that are again the easy decision. So like the makeup you don't
Yes,
use, that's an easy decision. The expired medication, easy decision. The food that's getting moldy in the fridge, easy decision.
easy.
So get those easy decisions done, and that will help you with that momentum when you
Yeah,
start dealing with the harder stuff.
so good. Where can everybody find you?
Yeah. So wherever you're listening to Natalie, you can find me. My podcast is Moms Overcoming Overwhelm. And yeah, I do decluttering challenges in my Facebook group. And then we do coffee gift cards and that kind of stuff when people
Fun.
are motivated to declutter, and just like 15 minutes a day for 5 days. And yeah, those would probably be the best place to find me, would be my podcast. And then you can find my Facebook group there.
Perfect. I'll put all the links in the show notes as well. And I just really appreciate you coming on here and talking about this. I could go on. I love organizing and getting into the nitty-gritty of all that. It's really fun for me, but I know there's mamas out there who's not so fun. So I hope that if you're listening to this and you're like, it's not fun, go find Emmy and talk to her about all that is, yeah, challenging you in that area. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, Natalie. It was great talking to you. If you like today's podcast, here's what you can do. Just take 30 seconds to leave me a review. I know you're a busy mama, you're overwhelmed in fact, but 30 seconds of your day makes such an impact. I'll be blessed by your words, they'll definitely make my day, and who knows, you might be entered for this month's giveaway. In Apple Podcasts, scroll down to write a review. Thanks so much for your time. I'm so grateful for you.